Hello and welcome to the Let That Shift Go podcast. I'm Noel.
And I'm Lena.
And this is where we talk about the good, the bad, and all the shift in between.
We'll just talk mad shift.
Let's get into it. And on this week's episode, monsters and ghosts, when the boogeyman scares the shift out of you.
That was a good one.
Yeah. But first, let's get into these skin deep cards. We like to do that before every episode. And you want to go first?
Sure, I'll go first. I pulled from the Family Edition deck.
Okay. Let's go for that.
In what way do you think you add to my happiness?
I think more recently, I think you watching, I could see the pride in you, and that makes you happy. Like the seeing it, the ways that when we work together, or even just the way you see that I'm growing.
Yeah.
I can see it makes you happy. You know, in the same way that you say
My pride in you. Yeah.
in the same way that you say you're like helping other clients heal and stuff like that is the best paycheck in the world, because I can see that in you. I can tell when it makes you happy, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I would definitely say that's true. When I see you like as yourself and fully just moving in the ways that you do and realizing your own gifts and helping, and it just brings a sense of like, that's my baby brother.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I am going to ask you my questions. What could we do with less of?
What could we do with less of? Let's see. Drama in the family.
Yeah, I mean that's still. I think
everybody
wishes
has that. Yeah.
Less drama.
But I think there's many parts to our family, and everybody's in a different stage of their own healing or their own realizations, and so it can be challenging. But yeah, I think we could always do with less of that. More joy, more happiness. But of course, that's a part of being human.
But we've seen in our family like conflicts come up even recently where the individuals fight through. Yeah, and even though there is drama, I would say there's a moment and an opportunity for us to see somebody grow. So at first it was drama, and you feel like, what is that? What it's going to be? But then it turns into something more beautiful. So it's an opportunity for somebody else.
Oh, yeah. And even the drama within our own family, like with our, our dad or our brothers, it's like, it's still, if it's upsetting, it's still giving you an opportunity to move through something. Yeah. So yeah, you're right. I don't think we're ever going to not have drama. I think that's actually the best way you grow. But of course.
It'd be nice to be able to pick and choose.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Exactly. All right. Well, so let's get into this topic, monsters and ghosts.
Okay.
It's something that I've been, thinking about and writing about a little bit in this last year, doing this awareness journey. I really noticed that initially in the beginning part of my journey, I was able to, attach onto the things that really hurt me. Yeah. And it came in a physical sense in terms of like the people that I can identify in terms of who the monsters are. They were easy to identify. Somebody who hurt me physically, yelled at me, all those types of things were easier, I should say, to deal with in terms of healing, because I had something to attach to, and it was very present for me. Yeah. And so I found ways to work through that.
Yeah, it kind of seemed like it was like a first layer, right? That's like maybe the low-hanging fruit is like, oh yeah.
Yeah, I like how you use that. Yeah, low-hanging fruit, because those are the ones that I wanted to go after first because I felt like they hurt the most, I guess. And they may not have been the most obvious in the sense that, a lot of the stuff initially when I opened up to you was things that I hadn't even realized I really needed to work on. Yeah. And those sometimes mesh with maybe a ghost instead of a monster. But the monsters themselves really were the very first layer because they were low-hanging fruit, like you said. Yeah. And I really attached to writing about them and just trying to figure out how it affected me.
So would you say when you're addressing monsters, so moving through your own healing journey, meaning first you had to figure out like, okay, there's something happening in me in my life. Why? And then going into this healing journey, this awareness journey is really becoming aware of like, yeah, these are the things that happened to me that probably had the greatest influence on why I am the way I am, which is now making me unhappy.
Yeah.
So, right, that's where it starts. And then you're going back and seeing like, yeah, there was a lot of physical abuse, there was emotional abuse. And so, of course, those are the first things, like the obvious ones, like you said, the low hanging fruit. So being able to focus on those right away it wasn't like you were searching for it.
No, but it gave me a place to start and see and look for the patterns and maybe in some of the ways that I'm repeating.
Yes.
The ways that I was hurt. And when I started to do that, when I started to really look into my surroundings and how the complaints about who I am and what I've done, I compared those to the monsters.
Yeah. To what was done to you.
To what was done to me. And I may have changed them in a sense, but I still was hurting other people by controlling or manipulating situations and putting burdens onto others to see things my way.
Right.
And do things the way I think that they should be done, you know? And working through that was great because I had something to look at. I'm working through the process of monsters, but then I started to look a little bit deeper into things. And when I started to find ways that I didn't love myself and things that were missing, because I was trying to compare myself in the monsters phase to how I was affecting other people and what other people did to me. And, you know, Jay Shetty said something like, you know, if you're asking from a partner to love you in a certain way, the best thing to do is to love yourself first. If you find that your partner or somebody's not loving you, find ways to fulfill that yourself.
So whatever you're asking from someone else, being able to do that for you first instead of seeking it outside of yourself.
Yeah, okay. Because the hurts were, you know, from the monsters were much easier, but the ghost parts, I was like, oh, well, let me love myself in the ways that I felt like I needed to be loved. Let me be there for myself. Let me show up on time for myself. All those things I started to do for myself. And then I started to do more reading on books about family dynamics and you know, dysfunctional families. I remember that book. Oh man. And it really just pointed out to me ways in which I wasn't loved.
Yeah.
And
did you find that out because you found it hard to figure out how to love yourself, or then you started to see all the ways that you weren't?
Yeah, I started to see because I didn't have an idea of what normal. I mean, normal could be, it's such a loose term, right? But what's normal for one person to the next, it just depends, right? But for me, what I had was normal, and as much as I knew was available, right? It's like the whole flea thing. I didn't know how high I could jump. I didn't know how much love I could receive or give to myself, because I was only, you know, in view of this. You know, there wasn't a lot of love going around in our house in terms of, you know, healthy ways of showing love. So, you know, when I started to look at ways that I didn't feel loved, I started to recognize people in my life that didn't love me and who they were and how they fell short for me and how those things affected me and how I could repeat those now. And so those became the ghosts.
Okay. So I remember you talking about this, and it was like it became really clear afterward. But yeah, first moving through, like, here's what, you know, the monsters did, but then that left room for you to be able to look at, wait, what was what did I not get? So it's not what did someone do? It's also what was not given. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, like with monsters, you know, I had a stepfather who was abusive and an alcoholic, and those, you know, because of that, I have a relationship with alcohol. I no longer drink, and I've went into those things, and kind of alcohol was actually a monster for me. And it doesn't have to do with sobriety. It's just more of how it affected me overall and the people in my life. And so that was a monster. My stepfather, who was abusive to my mom and myself, that was a monster. And I started to look at ways like what must have happened to him? Yeah. And then I stepped back a little bit more and pulled back the veil a little bit and was like, well, I remember my grandfather, Papung, man, he was just a son of a bitch, man. Yeah. So I can't imagine what my stepdad's life was. So as I started to pull these things apart, I just started to realize more and more monsters and ghosts are so different.
Yeah.
And the way that ghost came about was kind of like dad. And we've talked about several times. And on this, one of our last episodes, we talked about waiting for our father to show up on his weekends because we were in a split home and him not showing up. That was a massive ghost.
Yeah.
And for some reason, because I had all these other monsters in my life, I never really was angry about that until more recently.
Yeah.
Until I started to do the healing within myself and started to love myself and give me those things. And I started to love my children the way that I wish I was loved.
Yeah.
And then I started to ask myself, man, like what Logic said when he was doing that interview on that show.
Yeah.
He said, I am a man of my word today because you aren't.
Mm-hmm.
And that was so powerful.
Yeah.
Because I feel that same way, because I feel like I always have to be on time because my dad wasn't.
Yeah.
I feel like I have to be at every football game and every baseball game, whatever sports. I feel like, cross country, I have to be there for my kids, to be at everything because my parents weren't.
Yeah.
So the ghosts started to show themselves more and more. And it really just led to some threads that I can pull.
Yeah.
And helped tremendously having just maybe a label, if you will, of just the different types, because I wasn't aware of my healing having two different things. I thought it would just be this. And I was like,
you thought it would just be the monsters.
Yeah, that's all I was focused on. I thought once I'm done with these monsters, man, I'm done. And then it was like, you also got to start loving yourself and realizing that, the journey is to help yourself. Mm-hmm. And, so much of my journey early on was everybody else is doing things to me. They need help. And, that is classic. You just have to really step back and you can't help anybody. You can only help yourself.
Yeah.
And I had to really pull that in.
Yeah.
I wonder, so how does it resonate with you, this monsters and ghosts thing?
I mean, it made sense. I think just kind of watching you move through it, it's for sure like we're focused. It's so easy to focus on, what was, what the monsters did, whether it was abuse or neglect or abandonment, all of those things. Those are easy to identify. But then I feel like pulling back and being like, okay, now what, like you said, is what about the things you didn't get? It's not just what did you get, which was, abuse, abandonment, neglect. But we never really ask like, well, what didn't you get? Because that's also a form of trauma. It's even Dr. Gabor Mate talks about like, it's not just what happened to you, it's what didn't.
Yeah.
What you didn't get.
And I see a lot of people who say that like, well, I don't really have any trauma in my life. But they may have grown up without a parent. Yeah. But they don't look at that as a trauma because maybe that didn't happen to them per se. But well, even a parent, having in most of our society, right? It's two parents working, nobody's home. I mean, that's also a form of neglect or trauma to the child. They don't understand like, well, I have nice things, but actually what I would like is someone to be here who cares about me and loves me. So, while you can just kind of gloss over that and be like, well, they were never abusive. Yeah. But you have to think about, well, there's also things that you didn't get, in that. So I feel like that's also ghosts. You don't have to have monsters to have ghosts. You can just have ghosts. Yeah. But I don't think that's ever really been addressed as a thing. Like for, to realize why it might be hard for you to show love or show affection or show these things to your own children or to yourself. Maybe that was a ghost. You didn't really have that kind of example for you, or you weren't able to receive it in a way. So it's hard to create it it's hard to give something you didn't receive. Yeah. It's so hard to give something you never received because what are you trying to model? Yeah, you're just trying to figure it out. You're probably, coming in short. But, as long as if you get to that point where you have within that realization of like, there were ghosts, these are things I didn't get, kind of mourning that part and then going back and nurturing that part of yourself. I think also brings awareness to how you show up as a father, or as a friend or as a spouse, and being able to address both. So I thought that was really powerful when you came to that realization of monsters
not versus ghosts, but monsters and ghosts,
Yeah.
and I would say it's not something that we often kind of bring into attention, because one is, our dad was really a nice guy.
Yeah, this is not to go back and,
he's an
and
awesome
attack our
guy.
parents. And
No,
because they all had, we talked about a little bit about having, migrant parents move over to the United States and be first generation parents. And our dad had to work, and because of his race, he was held down at his job. And it took him a while to rise above. And our mom also had to work full time. So both of our parents were working and not in the home. So we were kind of latchkey kids.
Yeah.
And we were not given the coping mechanisms or tools because we didn't really have parents in the home. But it wasn't because they were bad parents. It was because they were doing the best they could at the time, because that's all that was about. They didn't have a support system.
No.
Their family was 2,000 miles away or more.
Also, they were doing much better than they had received.
Yes.
Right?
That's the other thing.
They
It's
were doing
incrementally
way better.
Yeah.
Right. And so did we. Like we did incrementally better than our parents, and hopefully our kids will be doing way better than we did. And that's the growth, hopefully.
Yeah. I'd
right?
love to have a conversation with our parents about their monsters and ghosts.
Oh, yeah. Well,
because that's something, I mean, when we're trying to find compassion for our parents, and we've talked about having conversations with our parents and really trying to look at it as if I put myself and flip it as if my 48-year-old son is going to come talk to me. Like I'm 48 now and I want to go talk to dad. Like, how would I hope my son would talk to me?
Yeah.
And I'm going to do that. So you got to be very careful with how we bring these things up. But I would love to know, some of these things, not to find blame, but just so I can find compassion and understanding. And you get to know them on even a deeper level.
Well, I think that in this healing journey that we've taken together with each other, with our parents, that has definitely been the theme, is that, there's no healing to be had through blame. There really, it's not going to get there. It's through compassion.
Do you feel like you were a ghost in my life?
Yeah. I mean, we didn't grow up in the same house. And I had a completely different view of what your experience was of me than what you were having. So there's definitely a ghost of me. You
are one of the most present people I know now, right? But growing up, I when I asked you that question, I didn't know the answer. But I feel like that is true.
Yeah.
And I hope you don't take it as a judgment, because the ghosts aren't necessarily people I'm trying to blame. It's just I'm recognizing how people played a role in my life. And I think that's what's important to understand.
Yeah, I don't feel any judgment in it. Probably because I know deep within me that I really, I didn't knowingly become a ghost in your life. The other was that there was no part of me that wanted to not be with you. So I know for me that was never a thought. That may not have been the reflection or the perception that you had. But for me, you can say that to me, yeah, you were a ghost in my life. And I'd be like, yeah, your experience is absolutely 1,000% valid of me. On my end, there was no part of me that didn't want to be with you.
There may be a third term there that represents something, that's even less obvious than the ghosts. Because I feel like you were also a kid.
Yeah.
So you got the same coping mechanisms and tools that I did, which was 0.0.
Well, for in our life, Dad was a ghost. Yeah. For you. In my life, Mom was a ghost for me.
Ah, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay.
We were in different houses, and I was also waiting for Mom to pick me up. And there was a lot of things going on in our lives, and our mom had a very extremely traumatic upbringing, and was doing the best that she possibly could, and has done everything now to just be completely present, and absolutely not a ghost. Yeah. But growing up, we had similar experiences, just on the opposite end,
Yeah. And I think maybe just asking the question and finding, like writing down and trying to recognize maybe the people in our lives.
Yeah.
In our immediate family, maybe just making a list of those things and writing down the people that play roles in our lives, and maybe trying to categorize them.
Yeah, because that's what my next question was. What do you recommend for somebody who's moving through their own healing journey, and maybe they have moved through the low hanging fruit, which is the person who hurt you or abuse or neglect or all of that, is also taking into consideration like this also could be a thing, and once you become aware of it, then there's some healing can happen around it. But what worked for you in being able to once you recognize, holy moly, this is actually something, monsters versus ghosts. How did you move through that? How would you suggest somebody work with that?
Well, it was a slow process because it just took time to come all together with the thought of monsters and ghosts. But what I have done, or what I found works, is exactly kind of what I was mentioning, is just kind of listing out. And I haven't done a complete list. I just wrote.
Well, I just made the list, so you got
you just made a list, so I got to add you to it. But I wrote some obvious monsters to me, and then I wrote the ghosts that I thought of, right? But I almost think now that we're talking and we're soundboarding, I'm thinking that actually making a list of family members in your life, because you just jumped on the list because I hadn't even thought to add you, and so this is what made me think to expand this a little bit more. And you could start like I did, which is just write the obvious ones for the monsters, and then try. It was harder to come up with the ghosts, but the more and more I started pulling at it, I was like, oh yeah, there's another ghost. Here's a ghost, and writing out 2 separate lists, and then doing expressive writing.
Yeah,
and just do expressive writing on that person.
Yeah.
And what that person means to you, how they played a role in my life.
Can you explain expressive writing for those who didn't hear that episode on expressive writing?
Yeah, we talked about it before. Practice. But yeah, expressive writing is it's a little bit like journaling, but it's not. It's more about writing down verbal diarrhea, just whatever's coming out of your thoughts, just putting it to paper without worrying about grammar, punctuation, capitalization, none of that. You're just writing down purely what's in your head and on your thoughts. Not for anybody else to read, and you're going to write for 15 minutes every day for 4 days in a row, if you can, about the same time, so you have a routine. If it's in the morning or in the afternoon or at lunchtime, if you just need to do 15 minutes per day, writing nonstop, expressive writing on the same topic, and you could read the topic the next day and expand on that, just pull from it and then go write again.
Yeah.
And the next day write again. And you'll see, like it did for me, the more I wrote on it, the more I started to pull apart things and remember stories and remember things and episodes and conflicts and feelings and emotions to those feelings.
Yeah,
and
you're removing that energy.
Yeah, and then I started to recognize how I play that same type of role today, but in a different way, and how I justify things. And so as I did that, I started to pull apart those things, and I started to see the patterns, and I started to go, this is a monster, and this monster lives today inside of me, expressing it in its own way, comes out, And so doing the same thing for ghosts, writing for Dad, I put for Dad because he was the one that I waited for. And I wrote about the times about waiting. And we did a podcast on that, also just sitting and waiting on Father's Day, and he didn't show up, and everybody's there. And man, the things that it did to me, and it brought me to this place where I knew this is as a 48-year-old grown ass man with my own kids who are grown ass, I'm getting emotional because my dad's not showing up to my Father's Day barbecue exactly like he didn't when I was a kid.
It's a very old feeling.
Yeah, and so literally writing about that episode, and then and going, oh man, and the feelings that it brought, and it reminded me of sitting in the window and just what that did to me as a kid, and how it affected me, and how it made me a man of my word today, because he wasn't or isn't. Yeah. Yeah.
So how does that, because when you're explaining it, what it feels like is can you get stuck then? Can you get stuck just pulling out all of these old memories and pains, and then what do you do with it? Or do you feel like it starts to bleed it out so that it's not?
No, I find with everyone, it starts to get easier and easier, and I start to feel the weight lifted every time.
Okay.
It was, like therapy, expressive writing, it was created by therapists, right? In a huge study, and they came up with it just accidentally.
Yeah.
But it's a proven concept to work.
Yeah.
So I just use this concept, write it down. I don't feel like I get stuck. I feel like it untangles things within
You're
me.
untying those knots.
Yeah, I'm untangling things because I never really understood how this person played a role. And I'm not even having a conversation with this person. I'm just having a conversation with myself, and I'm rereading what I wrote the day before and then feeling, wow. Rereading what you write unfiltered is different than today.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. And
it's
this
not a
isn't
journal.
even, it's not even something that, what I like about this with the expressive writing, or, you know, like recognizing monsters and ghosts and then using the expressive writing to kind of bleed it out and be able to see it, to kind of zoom out and be able to allow yourself to experience the feelings that are still kind of stuck there.
Yeah.
Is really powerful. And, you know, you don't have to have the person still present.
No.
And you don't have to go to the person and like beat this into them and you know, make them apologize. Like, that's not even part of it. It's really just recognizing something that's present in you and then being able to move it.
Yeah.
Right. And really being able to bring compassion to yourself, possibly to the person who is labeled as your monster or your ghost.
Yeah.
And being able to just kind of not have that be like a undercurrent that's running your system. So if, you know, you're sitting there at the campground and dad doesn't show up, you're just like, well, it is what it is. I mean, but you're not, that little boy is not still sitting on the curb.
Yeah. I think now what I would do is internally identify it, because now I have a label. The ghost is here, right? This is a ghost feeling.
Yeah.
I'm okay.
Yeah.
This is just an old story trying to amplify it and rev my autonomic nervous system and get me charged. But I understand, you know, my dad does the best that he can, and I'm okay.
And this is an old feeling inside
And this
of
is
me.
an old feeling, yeah.
You know what I love is that the work that you've done, and, you know, anybody who's kind of moving through their journey, or like in a state of like, there's the work to be done, you know, to embark upon this journey, is that normally, had you been sitting there and he didn't show up, and you're unaware of actually what is really bothering you about it, you could have taken it out on everybody there, right?
Oh, yeah.
And then everyone else can just feel the wrath and be, you know, in misery.
What's wrong with Noel?
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
Father's Day. Why is he in a bad mood?
Yeah, we did everything we could. Now nobody can do anything right. I'm angry. I want
Yeah,
to
and
make everyone
everybody
else
there
around
was
me.
trying to, you know, trying their best. My kids, my wife were doing their darndest. Everybody around was like so amenable and trying to do great hosts. It was a fantastic time, but none of that mattered.
Yeah, but I think at this point, it would have been a very different story a year ago.
Yeah, no.
You know?
Yeah.
A year ago, that would have been a very different ending to that. And there would have been zero awareness on maybe a little bit about why, but nothing about like what to do about it.
Well, Father's Day this last year was when I started the Monsters and Ghosts. That's what brought it about.
Yeah.
And so what I recognized on that day, I handled it better than I would have a year before that, for sure.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Because I was able to stay present and just have fun with the people that were there and be present for them. I didn't need to not be present because my father wasn't present.
Right.
You know what I
Right.
mean? Because that's what was happening.
Right.
He wasn't. We both weren't there because he didn't show up. Until I sat and I was like, "Wait a minute! Like, what am I
happening?
doing? What's happening?" So I had an awareness.
Yep.
But it still bothered me, and I hadn't quite worked it out yet. But this practice of writing down and labeling the people in my life as monsters or ghosts,
Is that what helped?
that's what helped.
So you it was actually a gift. It was a huge gift.
It was that was the treasure in that trigger.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That's where we got monsters and ghosts.
Yeah, you never know when a boogeyman's going to scare the shift out of you. You know what I mean? Because the monster, he was a ghost, and he came out, boo. And I was like, ah.
There went your shift.
There went my shift. And it really did. It got me to shift. But I didn't feel like I was getting stuck, to answer your question.
Yeah.
I really feel that labeling things, even in therapy,
Naming
being
it.
able to name things, it gives you something to reference. It puts it into your long-term memory because you're processing and thinking about it, and it becomes more in your subconscious so that you can use it in your tools. Whenever something comes up, you can remember, oh, this is a ghost. How does the ghost feel? Putting the ghost label on the people in my life, it almost gives me a way to just know how to act around them also. Oh, yeah, this is a ghost. This is how this person has been a ghost in my life, and they make me feel this way. Find peace.
Yeah.
This person is a monster. remember, they're no longer a monster. Everything in the past is in the past. Today's today. That's a different person in front of you now.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, we see everything through the past.
Yeah, we do.
Everything you see, everything you judge is you're doing it through the past, not through the present. So the more that you can, become clear, the more that you can live in the present and maybe possibly see things through the present moment.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I like it.
All right. That's been another episode of Let That Shift Go podcast. I'm Noel.
And I'm Lena. Let us know what your questions are, and we'd love to use them on a future episode. Or check us out on Insta at Let That Shift Go, or visit our website, serenitycovetemecula.com.